probably the cringiest line in the whole book, and that's saying a lot. I hate this. I do. I really do. Hello, fellow word lovers. Welcome back to Pocket of Poetry. My name is Olivia, and today I'm going to be doing a video that is very unique, and I'm a little bit nervous about it, but today I'm going to be reading you guys excerpts of old stories that I've written. So a little background. Basically, from the time I can remember, I've been obsessed with stories and reading. I think I started reading at like 4 or 5, and I just have always loved stories, and since I was young, I've always wanted to write my own. And so over the years in my lifetime, I have written quite a lot of stories of all different natures and types. When I was about 11, I went through a phase where I wrote adventure stories, and I would write them out on notebook paper and staple it together and make books. I think we all went through that phase, but yeah. So the stories that I'm going to be reading today are ranging from stories that I wrote in like my early teens to stories in like my later teens, and then some stuff I wrote more recently. There were a lot of different projects that I started and didn't finish throughout my teenage years, and then there were a couple of projects that I did finish. And just, I don't know. For me, reading my old writing is a way to kind of look back on how I've improved and how I've changed as a person since then. And to be honest, a lot of the times it is very cringy to read these past things, but I also find it just super fun because it's like looking into a little window to the past and seeing like how my past self thought, and honestly it's usually pretty entertaining and funny as well because, like I said, cringe. So today I wanted to share some of the inspiration / cringe with you and read some of the old stories that I have written. I can definitely do a part 2 of this eventually because I have a lot of stuff that I've written. I'm pretty nervous to be sharing some of these just because, they're unique, okay? Like, I was a unique soul when I was younger, so some of these are gonna be kind of weird, but we're just gonna see where this journey takes us. So, I have my little laptop here, and I've got a couple of tabs open of just like things that I wanted to consider reading. So the first one is a story that I actually had to go to my old Gmail account to find, but this one just like always sticks with me. I always remember it because it was this sort of like fantasy story that I started reading when I was around 15. The last edit on this document was made August 21st of 2016. I like to read when the last edit was because, I don't know, it's just like interesting to me. I like to keep the dates preserved, but I'm pretty sure it was like 2015 when I actually like started writing this, and so it's so funny. Like I don't know. So basically the concept, I'll explain a little bit about it before I start reading just to give you some background. Basically the concept is there's this guy, and he goes into the woods and he meets this girl just out there in the woods. He doesn't really know why she's there or where she comes from, but she's like this unearthly beautiful girl, and he like falls for her super hard. And basically it's sort of like a fantasy story about this forest where there's this like magic system, and this girl is like part of the magic of the forest. It's like kind of hard to explain what my logic behind it was, but basically there were like 5 different elements that kept the forest in balance, and each of the elements had a keeper over the element that was like this beautiful girl that was kind of like a fairy, and she was one of them. So that's the backstory on this one, and it's really cheesy, so I hope you're prepared for this. But I just find it so funny because I wrote in a very like flowery way, especially when I was younger. Like I used very big words, and I was very like just extravagant with the language that I used, which doesn't necessarily make good writing, as you will see, but I just find it really funny the way that I wrote. So anyway, I'm gonna read you guys the first little section of this, and then I might skip a little bit, but we'll see. So this is gonna be weird. Okay. The first time I ever saw her was the day my life changed forever, which of course is how I started it. Like, how else would you start it? Duh. I was going for a midnight walk on a sleepless night, traversing a path around the crystal lake. The woods were dark and twisted that night, with pools of shadow hidden from the pearly moonlight that dusted everything with a mysteriously wonderful glow, like a benevolent fairy queen sending her blessing. I was just coming out of an eerie shadow when I saw her, a slender girl standing in a pool of moonlight. It poured over her, turned the simple dress she was wearing to enchanted silver that shimmered around her body. Her back was turned to me, and all I could see was the cascades of extraordinary hair pouring down her back and floating all around her. It was thick, deep, and enchantingly wavy. Falling down to her knees. This hair, black as the midnight sky, seemed beautifully alive somehow, with the sparkling tints of moonlight bringing out a magic quality. So yeah, this is just to give you a small sampling of the way in which I wrote. And then she turned around. I made it super dramatic. Her eyes were wide and innocent in the silver light, their pure blue color enhanced and sparkling. Her sooty lashes were long and tangled, framing the raw beauty that I saw in a way that was absolutely electrifying. Her face was small and delicate, and surrounded by that massive amount of hair, she looked queenly and dignified, her complexion also matching the light. Let a soft, translucent glow off of her face. Yeah, I can barely get through this. This is rough. But yeah, that was just a small sampling of the way that I wrote. I want to skip forward a little bit in this story because there's a part that I actually want to read. Maybe not. Actually, yes, I do. I want to read to you guys the part where I describe we came to a place where the trees grew more tightly together, almost like they were hiding something precious within them. We stopped and she turned to me, her celestial blue eyes full of gravity. Gently, she reached up to touch my cheek. Sorry, I have to okay. My woods hold many secrets. You have shown a response to the call of the trees and the lake. You are very perceptive for a mortal man. So I've decided to trust you. Do you promise to tell no human being of the things you see tonight? Dumbly, I nodded. Then follow. She led me through a small gap between two tree trunks and into Wonderland. Also, ... Wonderland. Had to add that. The first thing I was conscious of was light. Not sunlight or moonlight or any kind of light I'd ever seen before, but a shimmery, unearthly sort of light with a violet glow to it. It was a far-reaching light, filling all the little spaces and gaps and hollows surrounding. It had a feel to it, almost a taste of light, prettiness, flowers, and eerie elfin laughter. It played lightly over all the objects around it, the trees, grass, and the beautiful girl's hair and face, making her seem softer and friendlier. In the center of the cluster of trees, there was what looked like a lake, but it was full of soft, pulsing, misty light. Small sparks of violety glow raised up and flavored the air around me. The lake seemed to be the source of beautiful light that glowed everywhere. The girl was facing me, a delightful dimpled grin on her face as she watched my apparent wonder. It's beautiful, isn't it? Yes, very beautiful, but what is it? She reached her hand out and let one of the tiny glows land on her palm. This, she said, is one of the 5 power sources of the Enchanted Woods. It's called Vistium. Fascinated, I stared at it. Power sources, I asked? Yes, it is the power of mystery and beauty. She blew on the spark and I watched, entranced as it shifted into the shape of a thin, delicate flower with exactly 5 petals in her hand. She looked up at me, immediately drawing my eyes to her face. Yeah, so I'm not going to keep reading any more of this because it's rough, but basically I just wanted to read that description of kind of my little imagination about the Vistium, which is this element that apparently infused the woods with mystery and beauty. And then, so basically later on, we meet all of these other characters who have other elements that they're in charge of. So if I don't know, if anyone cares to hear more about that, I could read more of it in another video, but that is the first story that I wanted to read. My overall thoughts when I read it are always a lot of cringe because obviously the way that I describe this ethereally beautiful girl is very rough to get through. I don't know. And just how boring and vanilla the guy is, it's pretty bad. The guy basically just existed as a prop to admire her. And she, yeah. Anyway, so obviously it's very rough, but I do enjoy reading it because I feel like it's fun, seeing just the imagination that I had to come up with these different elements and this whole magic system that I kind of came up with. Because I'm usually more of a contemporary writer. I don't do a whole lot of fantasy stuff, and so for me this was I don't know, for me I was pretty proud of it at the time that I wrote it because I was oh, I came up with a magic system, and anyway, so I was proud of that. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to read from was the romance novel that I wrote when I was 16. The last edit on this, I guess I edited it. Okay, well I finished this book in 2017, and it's just simply titled Ivy's Story. It's about a girl who had a heart disease, a fatal heart disease, and falls in love with a guy. And the story was about her romance with this guy as well as her relationships with her family members. And It was a very family-heavy story, so I talked a lot about her siblings, her parents, like their family dynamic and stuff. And I have to say, my favorite character in the whole book that I wrote, and by the way, this book is so dramatic and so full of angst. Like, you have no idea how much angst was in my soul when I wrote this as a 16-year-old. But my favorite character in the book is her older brother. He's like this tortured genius character who, like, is super smart. He's like this genius, but he's so introverted, and he has like anxiety and depression, and he's just this like ball of angst basically. And I kind of crushed on her older brother, to be honest, more than I did on the actual love interest in the story, because I swear the love interest in the story is, again, so bland. I did not know how to write interesting male love interests as a teenager. I hope that I've become better since then, but yeah, basically all my main characters were very vanilla and boring. But I wanted to read a scene out of this book because it was such a big part of my teenage years, and like such a big part of my formation as a writer, because it was the very first project book that I finished to completion, and like I was pretty proud of that fact. Like, yeah, it sucks, and I read back on it now and I cringe really hard, but the fact that I had finished a book was like a really big deal to me. So I'm going to attempt to find a good scene to read. I really want to read a scene with the older brother so you guys can kind of get a feel for him, because he's great. In fact, I think I'm just going to skip straight to the scene where, so the main character is Ivy, her love interest is Eric, and her older brother's name is Thane, which is short for Nathaniel. At the time I thought that was like the coolest name ever, so I used it for my character. But yeah, so Eric and Thane are meeting for the first time in this book. And that's the part that I'm going to read to you guys, because it's honestly my favorite scene, I think. And Thane is like insanely overprotective of Ivy, his younger sister. He's like very, very overprotective of her, very threatened by anyone like showing interest in her. Honestly, he's pretty toxic. He's that toxic, tortured, angsty guy that's very popular these days. So good. It's just so like angsty, and I love it. Just to give a little bit of context for the scene, in the scene, Eric is supposed to ask Thane questions about their church. So he's asking him like religious questions, but he's also like very intimidated by Thane. So this is the scene. Okay. I'm just gonna skip. I don't know. There's a lot of boring crap that happens in this book, to be honest. So I'm skipping past all that. Once seated at the table, Eric looked around. The Smiths were all entertaining their other guests, and now that Eric had his plate of food, nobody was paying him much attention. Elle had disappeared when her mother beckoned her over to greet her guests, reminding Eric to try the blackberry pie she helped make. Elle is the youngest sister in the family, by the way. Ivy was with another group of people as well, and Eric found himself alone. He took a bite of fruit salad and wondered if he should introduce himself to someone. He didn't spend too much time wondering before Thane casually strolled over and sat down beside him. He was wearing that suit again, which for some reason seemed to make him way more intimidating. Eric felt his throat tighten as the tall blonde young man looked him over coolly. Eric met his gaze. "Hello, Nathaniel. How are you?" "I'm doing well. How are you?" His sentences were clipped, and he kept his eyes fixed casually on Eric with that soul-searching gaze. All right. Eric did his best to sound tough. "Your family definitely knows how to host a party." He smiled through his weak attempt at conversation. Thane was unamused. "Ivy mentioned you might have some questions about what you saw today." That makes it sound so bad. "Oh, questions. Do I have questions?" he's thinking. "Well, was she correct?" Wow, this guy is very direct, Eric thought. "Do you attend church regularly?" Thane asks him. Eric squirmed. "Well, I go with my parents sometimes, but when I'm on my own, it's a little different," he finished thinking. And then he explained something about their church. "That's fascinating," Eric couldn't help saying. Thane raised an eyebrow. "Why do you think so?" "Well, it's just, I don't know, I think it's admirable for someone as young as Elle to be able to make that kind of decision about her life. She seems like she understands that she made an important decision." I'm so sorry, this whole part is so bad, okay. For the first time, Thane's face showed a hint of a smile. "I think she does. She's a sweet little girl. Eric said the words carefully, gauging his reaction. I don't know if I can read this next part. Yes. Well, she's been raised on being expressed in fairy tales. What else would you expect? Nathan just looked the words dreaming, almost as if he had forgotten that Eric suddenly found himself vaguely fascinated by the expression in Dane's eyes. He looked almost like he had been transported to a different world, a world in which nobody in this room had any part, a world where intriguing discoveries were being made. He almost forgot his extreme discomfort as he wondered what the interesting young man could possibly be thinking about. I was rereading this recently, and I swear there's more chemistry between the two guys than there is between the actual love interests in the book. Like, it goes to show you I'm not even reading the scenes between the love interests. I'm reading the scene between him and her brother, which I just feel like they have more chemistry, honestly. Like, I do. Okay, I'm skipping. Okay. Thane spoke. So, you've asked your questions. May I ask you some of my own? Oh great, here it comes. Eric felt his throat tightening, his usual response to extreme nervousness. Of course, he looked right into Thane's intense, stormy gaze. I need to know if you have intentions toward my sister. His voice was calm. You see, I'm her older brother, and it's my duty to protect her at all costs. We've been blessed with a wonderful stepfather who treats us as his own children, but our real father walked out on my mom when I was only 6. Ever since the day I realized he wasn't coming back, I vowed to be the protector of my mother and sisters, no matter what, so I'm sure you'll excuse me if I'm a bit defensive. Eric swallowed hard. Thane wasn't being dramatic in the slightest. I don't know about that. And that was when he knew that Nathaniel Smith was not to be trifled with. That cool gaze remained on Eric the whole time he was speaking, and when he finished, he continued to look at him as if waiting patiently for a response. Scarily enough, Eric could totally imagine a 6-year-old Thane making such a solemn vow to himself. I swear, just like all those intense stares and all the like, just awkwardness, like I just feel like their chemistry, it's there. It really is. Is it just me? Am I the only one that sees it? He took a deep breath. The thing to do was to respond with equal maturity and presence, if that was even possible. I definitely understand your concern. I know that Ivy is still very young, and I realize that you probably think it means danger to her, but I guess you'll just have to trust me when I say that the last thing on this earth I would ever do is hurt her. Should I go for this? Thane had been honest with him. Eric figured the least he could do was to return the favor. I really care about your sister. She's been a really good friend to me in the short time I've known her, and well, I know she's an incredible girl. I can only imagine how much you must love her. I know she adores you. Oh, I'm so bored by him. Also, he's so awkward, like painfully awkward, like stumbling over his words all the time. Like, I wrote him so awkward, and I hate it. I'm like, why did I make such an awkward character? The two men sat, locked in what seemed to be a stare down. Eric wasn't sure he could handle much more of this intensity, but he was determined to hold his ground. If Thane was reading his soul before, he now knew every part, down to the smallest details. I just feel like, wow. That is, wow. After what seemed like forever, Nathaniel spoke. I can respect that, was all he said. Then he slowly extended his hand for Eric to shake. It seemed like a sacred moment, as the two of them shook hands in unspoken agreement, to respect one another's feelings for Ivy and to stay out of each other's way. So yeah, basically, I just wanted to read that part because it's so angsty. And there's another scene later on with Thane that's like the angstiest thing ever, and I honestly would read it if I did a part 2 of this video. So yeah, I'm gonna end this video here. Thanks so much for watching if you stuck around for the whole thing. If you did, I'm really sorry if this was really boring. I just wanted to try it out and see what kind of video this could be, if it was fun, if it was interesting at all, if anyone enjoyed it. So yeah, if you want me to do a part 2 of this video and read more, because I have plenty more where that came from, leave a big thumbs up. And let me know down in the comments if you have any thoughts about my extremely cringy romance stories that I wrote. But yeah, thanks so much for watching.